Hey there, Black Sheep. Welcome back to the channel, and this week's episode of This Bites, the series in which we analyze the Watchtower and how it implements the bite model. If you're unfamiliar with the bite model, it's the go-to method used to identify extreme control groups and cults, and the methods that they use to coerce, recruit, and maintain control of their members. This week, at a Kingdom Hall near you, Jehovah's Witnesses will be studying Article 8 of the February 2024 Watchtower Study Edition. The article is entitled, Keep Following Jehovah's Guidance. Paragraph 1 starts us off strong with the fear tactics. It tells Jehovah's Witnesses to picture themselves helplessly lost in a dangerous forest, a forest that they can't make it out of alive without a guide. It then says, this world is like that forest. It is filled with danger that especially threatens our spiritual health. Jehovah's Witnesses should be on high alert always, because according to this, danger is everywhere. Emotional control. Instill fear, such as fear of the outside world, enemies, losing one's salvation. Paragraph 2, in so many words, says that the governing body are the gatekeepers of salvation. The first 4 sentences get all the red flags. It says, how does Jehovah guide us? Primarily by means of his written word, the Bible. However, he also uses human representatives. For example, he uses the faithful and discreet slave. You can't make it out of that dangerous forest without a guide. Who's your guide? Well, primarily, it says, that would be Jehovah. But immediately after saying that, redirects your attention back on them. You need to hang on to their every word, the every word of these 9 guys who live in New York if you want to benefit from Jesus' sacrifice. Behavior control. Instill dependency and obedience. Thought control. Forbid critical questions about the leader, doctrine, or policies allowed. How grateful we are for reliable guidance during these critical last days.
Well, knowing this, then, we are not embarrassed about adjustments that are made, nor is an apology needed for not getting it exactly right previously.
It helps us maintain Jehovah's approval and keep us on the road of life. So basically, if you want God's approval to live, you better have unwavering trust and loyalty to these guys.
Our future kings, the governing body.
Now, a complete trust in the governing body.
The governing body could be likened to the voice of Jesus, the head of the congregation. So when we willingly submit to the faithful slave, we're ultimately submitting to Jesus' authority and direction.
Our governing body. They never lie or deceive us. We can have absolute trust in the governing body.
Amazingly, Jehovah's Witnesses, when asked if they're a cult, will say that one of the reasons you can tell they're not a cult is that they don't have a human leader. Oh, no, we don't have that. On their own website, under the frequently asked questions, they say,
are Jehovah's Witnesses a cult? No. What is a cult? Consider 2 common perceptions regarding cults and why those perceptions don't apply to us. Some think of a cult as being a dangerous religious sect with a human leader. Jehovah's Witnesses do not look to any human as their leader. Rather, we adhere to the standard that Jesus set for his followers when he stated, your leader is one, the Christ.
So no, they don't have one human leader. They have that times 9. Paragraph 3, we might occasionally find it a challenge to follow Jehovah's guidance. When the counsel comes from unperfect men, the counsel may conflict with our likes and dislikes. We might feel that the direction we receive is unwise and conclude that the counsel must not be from Jehovah. At such times, we especially need confidence that Jehovah is the one leading. It then explains that this article is going to help Jehovah's Witnesses to ignore their gut feelings that something isn't right and go against what they personally like, dislike, and shove down their intuition and trust that whatever the governing body says is coming from Jehovah directly. Behavior control. Discourage individualism encourage groupthink. Reaching our first subheading, How Jehovah Guided the Nation of Israel. Paragraphs 4 through 8 talk about how the Israelites had obvious and visible signs that Moses was backed by God, like a pillar of fire, the Red Sea opening up, manna, a food source, falling from the sky on a daily basis. Miraculous signs were shown that apparently God doesn't use anymore because I guess they were too effective. And paragraph 7 is basically a veiled threat. It says that the Israelites set a good example of following Jehovah's guidance, and that when they did that, they were able to reach the promised land. So basically, if you don't follow their guidance, they're threatening your salvation. They're threatening your life, and they're threatening your hope. Emotional control. Instill fear, such as fear of losing one's salvation. Emotional control. Phobia indoctrination. Inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. No happiness or fulfillment possible outside the group. Terrible consequences if you leave. Shunning of those who leave. Fear of being rejected by friends and family. Never a legitimate reason to leave. Those who leave are weak, undisciplined, unspiritual, worldly, brainwashed by family or counselor, or seduced by money, sex, or rock and roll. Again, if Jehovah's Witnesses aren't following the governing body, they risk being like the Israelites and not getting their reward. Subheading 2. How Jehovah Guided the Early Christians. Paragraph 9 says, Jesus did not personally direct each individual disciple. He used the apostles and the older men in Jerusalem. No bite model here, just the Watchtower Bible Tract Society trying to build their case for Jehovah's Witnesses to comply and trust that God is specifically using these guys. Even though this guy, Jeffrey Jackson, said it would be presumptuous to think they were God's chosen spokespeople on earth.
Now, does the governing body, or do the members of the governing body, do you see yourselves as modern day disciples, the modern day equivalent of Jesus' disciples?
We certainly hope to follow Jesus and be his disciples.
And do you see yourselves as Jehovah God's spokespeople on earth?
That, I think, would seem to be quite presumptuous to say that we are the only spokesperson that God is using.
Using the Israelites, using Moses, using King David, using King Hezekiah, using the apostles and the older men in Jerusalem to validate the governing body. This is a thought fallacy. Fallacies are common errors in reasoning that will undermine logic by means of illegitimate arguments or irrelevant points. What's being used here is called the slippery slope fallacy, and this is a conclusion based on the premise that if A happens, then eventually, through a series of small steps, through B, C, X, Y, Z, will happen too. Basically equating A and Z. What happened with Moses and the Red Sea and the Israelites is not the same as JW Broadcasting, is not the same as this Watchtower article. This is a thought fallacy. Subheading 4, How Jehovah Guides Us Today. Paragraph 11 says that we can see evidence that Jehovah has continued to use human representatives. It then brings up 1914, which is important to Jehovah's Witness doctrine, although it is a date that was incorrectly calculated based on 607 BCE, a year debunked by historical artifacts. Linked in the description will be a few in-depth videos if you'd like to look further into the debunking of 1914 and why the math is not mathing. Despite the math not mathing, Jehovah's Witnesses have to believe in 607 BCE, despite the verifiable evidence of its inaccuracy, because they teach that in 1914, world events confirmed that God's kingdom had begun to rule, which is explained by this nifty little chart from their website. This year is when God apparently started choosing the 144,000 kings and priests that will rule in heaven over the earth, which, of course, include these 9 guys. This is information control, deception, deliberately withhold information, like the legitimate year, distort information to make it more acceptable, stick to the year 607 BCE, systematically lie to the cult member, insist on 1914. It then mentions Charles Taze Russell, the original founder of this cult. It tells us that he was chosen, and that proof that he was chosen is that he created these indoctrination programs. I guess we'll ignore that all cults have indoctrination programs. Gilead Bible School is no pillar of fire. Thought control. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth, adopting the group's map of reality as reality. Instill black and white thinking. Paragraph 13 then goes on to say, looking back, we can clearly see that Jehovah was guiding his people during that difficult time. Clearly, if you're waiting on manna or a pillar of fire or the Red Sea to part, that's on you. This paragraph says it should be obvious to you that God was behind these schools and programs that teach Jehovah's Witnesses how to peddle their propaganda and emulate the governing body's ideal image of what a Christian should be. Emotional control. Manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. Paragraph 14. Today, the members of the governing body, continue to look to Christ for guidance. In turn, circuit overseers and elders provide direction to the congregations. Christ is carefully guiding the faithful slave and appointed elders. Again, if you're looking or waiting for any actual proof or miraculous signs like all of the previous worshipers were given, well, there will be none. You just have to accept it. We, therefore, have every reason to trust the guidance that he is providing through those appointed to take the lead. Accept it. Emotional control. Teach emotion-stopping techniques to block feelings of doubt. Thought control. Forbid critical questions about leader, doctrine, or policy allowed. Last subheading. We benefit when we keep following Jehovah's guidance. Paragraphs 15 and 16 give the examples of maybe real people and the measures of personal happiness and comfort that they were willing to sacrifice to be full-time volunteers, offering their time, energy, life, free labor to this multi-million-dollar organization. For instance, they talk about Robin. Robin sold her photography equipment, a hobby that she says she loved, and cried parting with her things. Doesn't say what happened to the money she got from selling the equipment, if it was donated or not, but she says, we have the deep satisfaction of knowing that we are giving Jehovah everything we have. Giving Jehovah everything we have. Everything. Behavior control. Financial exploitation, manipulation, or dependence. Behavior control. Major time spent with group indoctrination and rituals and or self-indoctrination, including the internet. Marcia, like many young Jehovah's Witnesses, was discouraged from pursuing higher education in favor of volunteering for the organization. She says, Marcia took to heart the encouragement to pursue a career in Jehovah's service. I was offered a 4-year scholarship at a university, but I wanted to pursue spiritual goals. I now enjoy regular pioneering and my flexible work schedule has allowed me to serve as a commuter at Bethel. So Marcia volunteers. Marcia gave up a 4-year scholarship, like so many Jehovah's Witness youth have done. Behavior control, permission required for major decisions. Now Marcia volunteers, so after giving up her time in the recruiting work, she also volunteers and commutes to the Bethel compound. Women can't live on the compound unless they're married to a male Bethelite. So for a few hours a day, she may be allowed in the compound to clean or fold laundry, and she describes these as special privileges. The question asks, what do you learn from the experiences of those who followed Jehovah's guidance? We learn that those who follow Jehovah's guidance live a life of struggle and mediocrity. Paragraph 18 says, no doubt Jehovah will continue to use human representatives. No doubt. You can't have any. It says, let us always follow Jehovah's guidance, including that which is provided by the men who are appointed to watch over us. Jehovah leads us away from spiritual danger and toward our destination, everlasting life in the new world. Again, there's no hope of you surviving this world, having a happy life, avoiding danger, or any hope of any kind of afterlife unless you obey the men that they are saying Jehovah chose. The men that there is no proof that Jehovah chose. This again is thought control, forbid critical questions about leader, doctrine, or policy allowed, and it's most of all emotional control, phobia indoctrination, inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. No happiness or fulfillment possible outside the group, terrible consequences if you leave, shunning of those who leave, fear of being rejected by friends or family, never a legitimate reason to leave. Please know, black sheep, that there is happiness to be found outside of the Watchtower. You do not have to resign your whole life to live in obedience to 9 men who live in New York that you may never meet and the rules that they tell you you have to follow. It's up to them to prove that they were chosen. That brings us to the end of the article. So let's tally up the score. We have 4 for behavior control, 1 for information control, 3 for thought control, and 6 for emotional control. That gives us a total score of 4,136. And since this is the last article in the magazine, finally, we get to calculate an overall score for the February 2024 study edition. Article 5 had a score of 4,232. Article 6 had a score of 1,153. Article 7 had a score of 7,117. And then today's was 4,136. That gives us a total score of 16,638. A number just as important as the date 1914. Maybe you can do some pyramid math with that number. Thank you so much for watching. Please give the video a like. It helps the information get out to more people. And continue thinking freely, black sheep.